More car talk. This being a check-in for the Glss Htl, Chapter 13, which is a fairly long one, and mostly concerns Leon. Leon, who we first met in the kind of the opening of this book, where he was a guest at the titular Glss Htl, and was the one of Jonathan Arcadis's victims, one of the guys that he sat down and had the misfortune of getting chatted up and talked into investing his money, all his money, in fact, in this thing, and him becoming one of the people that goes completely, as a result, goes completely bankrupt. And in this chapter, we sort of learn his fate, and we also learn a little bit more about the fate of Vncnt, in this chapter, and her ultimate fate that gets, broadcast at the very beginning of her going into the water, and that being her end. He and his wife, they're living in their wealthy house when all this stuff happens. They're missing mortgage payments. They can't sell it. Nobody's interested in thing. This is all during the financial collapse. And they do what a lot of Americans did at that point, which is they abandoned their house. They had the good fortune of owning an RV. So they take the RV and leave, and become this part of the great homeless segment of the American population. I forget what she calls it. This kind of the people that have fallen through the cracks, and through her wife, knowing the psychic lady that he said was like one of the few women he'd had, like a few people he'd had a kind of a good conversation with, the other one being Jonathan Arcadis, about, it's like, oh, you really love the whole kind of the shipping industry, because that's where he was like an upper level thing of the shipping industry, of all the shipping containers, that kind of an industry of knowing where all products came from. He could look at somebody and just sort of see them through all that. And this psychic lady also kind of picked that up on him, that was what he loved to do. And she too has lost her house. Said, oh, well, I guess maybe it was easier for her because she saw that coming. And his wife says, well, she saw a lot of freeways in her future, and she thought it was just meant she was going to travel, but now she's living in her van. And through her is how they learned that, you can just sort of live on the road, and pick up these kind of odd modern seasonal jobs of working at redemption centers during like peak seasons, of being a campsite director, of stuff like that. Various kind of like these little seasonal Joe jobs, and you can kind of travel the country doing that sort of stuff, and living very, very inexpensively, which is where they're at now. So yeah, that is what they end up doing. And it's also just sort of that peeling back of like, oh, this is what a lot of Americans got pushed into with that 2008 collapse, and the just general collapse of the entire kind of the American financial system, which these people haven't never kind of come back into the system in a way. They're outside, or they're living on the fringes of it. It's interesting. He remembers someone talking about paramedics ushering this guy into the world of the sick, and it's like that's another world. There's all these different worlds that are living, different realities that are living side by side. That if you're not a part of them, you're not aware of them. There's very much that feel. Now he gets called back into his old life when his former executive assistant has become an executive at the very shipping company that laid him off as because he was a contracted worker, and they basically killed all of that, all of those contracts, which is why he wasn't needed to end up living this kind of interstitial life instead. But she calls him back because they have this investigation. And what the investigation is a chef on one of their cargo ships went overboard, and there's somebody who is suspected of it, but she wants somebody, an outsider, to look at it because companies have a tendency to want to cover things up. They want to not make waves. And he's like, well, I need the work and I'm hoping to get more contracts. Like, that would be awesome. So he accepts it. And he's partnered with this guy who's like former LAPD, who is kind of the company investigator. And they interview all the people. And yes, it is Vincent. And yes, the guy who is suspected of killing her is the guy she was dating on this cargo ship. Indeed, what seems to have happened, they've got videotape of her. They reportedly, they'd been having an argument. She went off. She went down to that little corner of the ship, which had been talked about earlier in the novel, which is a blind spot where there are no video cameras. It's a private place, a private spot. And, she was in that private spot for like a half an hour. They saw her just go in. They didn't see her come out. And then they saw the guy. I can't remember what his name is. They saw him go in there, and 5 minutes later for him come out. And that's the last evidence that she was ever on this ship. That was her going down that thing and just never reappearing again. They interview guys, and it's like, yeah, she liked to take videos of stuff, for 5-minute lengths, just of nothing. She actually seemed like someone who was actually really happy with her life there. She and this guy that she had the argument with didn't vacation together. She would go off and do stuff like, hiking in the Andes, or, learning pottery in Italy. She was like living like a really full and sounds like really kind of interesting life, and, wasn't interested in settling down. So they get all this stuff. It's like, it doesn't sound like someone who was going to commit suicide. Then again, her mother didn't sound like that either. And I guess, personal history of what happened to her mother never came up in this investigation. But as they're leaving, a guy who's leading them off the ship says, "Look, you should know this. I didn't say it in the interview, and I don't want it particularly connected to me. But he had worked with the guy on another ship, and he gotten into an argument with a woman. And when he kind of turned away to give him privacy, he heard a smack. He came back, and the woman was there holding her face, and said, like, what the hell?" And it's like, he hit you. It's like, he did not hit me. She's like, the woman's like not interested in this becoming a thing. They had this back and forth where she said, like, if you ever do that to me again, I'll throw you off this ship. And he said, he back to her said, not if I don't throw you off the ship first. So basically he threatened a woman to throw a woman off the ship in his back history. And Leon takes notes of this, and he's assuming that the detective guy was also taking notes. But on the thing back, he says, the detective guy says, "Can I see your notes?" He hands him notes. He rips out those 2 pages and says, "Look, you want to get more jobs here? It's like, you're not going to get that if you become the angel of death, the guy who caused trouble for everybody else and got people fired. Because that's what you'll do if we report this. And, you want more work. I know," he says, like, "I Googled you. I know that A, you had a personal connection to Vincent because of Jonathan Archaeus. And B, that, you're living in an RV working hand to mouth. I know you need the work." And so Leon says, "Okay, fine," and agrees to it. And so that's going to get buried. and you can't help but see that as a thing. And the detective guy, maybe out of act of kindness, sends him a thing, and it shows it's one of Vincent's tapes where she's videotaping the ocean, just like the guy said, just videotaping the ocean. But in that tape, the camera pans down, and she's obviously leaning precariously over the railing and filming the water. So it could have just been a moment of carelessness, that she was, distracted, decided to do a videotape and fell over. But you'll never know. And us knowing Vincent's history, it's like, well, her mother drowned, and is that something that was a reoccurring fixation? Videotaping the ocean. It's like, that's where her mother is, never found. Like, so there's that as well as there's this guy who maybe had a violent past. Who knows? What that is all about. So yeah. Another interesting chapter in the Glss Htl, and I guess maybe my own fascination with suicide, having my father committing suicide and just never knowing sort of what was going on in his head. I mean, his is a lot more clear for me in that he had lost his job, he was an alcoholic. It's fairly cut and dry, but there's still that kind of unanswered questions that you're never going to get answers to. And I mean, all human motivation, it's inside of other people's heads, and fiction is a great way to access other people's imagined inner landscapes, but we never get there quite, do we? Yeah. So that's the Glss Htl for this one. I'm pretty close to the end. There's like maybe an hour left in the novel, so I am quite enjoying it. It's chilly. It's chilling, but it's really good. All right, more videos later.